Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast, where we celebrate filmmaking, storytelling and cinema across the island of Ireland. And in today's episode, we are delighted to partner with the National Talent Academy for VFX, an initiative supported by Físh Éireann. So learn more about the training opportunities and supports they offer at nationaltalentacademies.ie/VFX. Recorded on location at the Spinners Mill studio at RENDR Festival Belfast, we catch up with Jay Worth. He's an Emmy and Visual Effects Society award-winning VFX supervisor who's worked on the Fallout series, Westworld, Fringe and much, much more. So RENDR is a vibrant festival for inspiring creatives with local and international speakers from the worlds of film, gaming, animation and immersive technologies. So check out this unmissable industry event at RENDR, that's RENDR, festival.com. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You joined the industry in 1997, is that correct?
Yeah, I started out, I tried every possible job in entertainment. I started earlier than that, I just tried everything. I was a site coordinator, a clip coordinator. I worked as the travel coordinator for the Sinbad Soul Music Festival. I was a set PA, an office PA. And then I found my way to Digital Domain as a coordinator. And I liked it, but I found I didn't love being on the vendor side at that part. So my wife and I actually got married. I got out of the business for 5 years and just tried a bunch of other stuff and still couldn't find out what I wanted to do. And I finally, 2004 or 5, I called my friend who I'd known since 5th grade, and he was working with J.J. Abrams on Alias. And he's like, hey, do you want to come work with me? And 6 weeks later, I was on the set of Alias as a coordinator. And that started 21 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Doing what I'm doing now, which is working on the show side of television series.
Some of the biggest, most
it was fun.
Like ambitious sci-fi and world creation.
Yeah, it was for season 5 of Alias. And then I went from that to Lost, which was amazing. I did Cloverfield. And then I got the call to be a supervisor on Fringe.
Wow.
And that kind of started my supervising career. And yeah, I hit 500 episodes of television this year.
Oh my goodness.
Over 21 years. So it's been a great ride.
It's a great one and so continuous. And then like in the heart of it for so much of like amazing sci-fi, amazing stories. Like maybe I would love to go back to earlier on in your career and talk about the kind of skill set it took to evolve, because I imagine it's not an easy gig. There was probably less people doing it back in the beginning.
Yeah, there were. The thing I like about visual effects is that I feel there's enough space for a bunch of different people's expertise in how to approach it and how to get into it. Yes, I know a lot of people that started out compositing, they started out as CG supervisors, then they realized that they wanted to be on the show side, they got to be supervisors. There's people who start out on the vendor side, there's people who go to film school. I had none of those. I was a theater major back in the day.
But with a strong grounding in tech? Like, were you always, no? Then what was that?
I have no tech. And what it was I realized that what I've done for years, and I did it in a lot of other industries also, was I creatively problem solve other people's problems. So whether it be I worked in advertising, whether it be on set, whether it be I was a theater producer, whatever it was, regardless of the tools or the language, I felt like the creative problem solving aspect of it has always been what I thrive in. And obviously there's certain industries that it takes longer to figure out the technicals of like, well, what does it mean to fix that one creatively? But that's how it started. And I was lucky enough to get hooked up with J.J. Abrams and my good friend Kevin Blank, who kind of showed me everything on Lost and Alias. And then when it came to Fringe, the funny thing about it was the showrunner, Jeff Pinkner, amazing guy. The first day, he's like, so Jay, I'm not really much of a VFX guy. Just email JJ. And I'm like, the JJ? The guy I've never met? The guy who I don't even know if he knows I'm on the show? He's like, yeah, that guy. So that started a 2-year email chain with J.J. Abrams. I never had an in-person meeting with him. I never had a phone call with him, but he looked at and approved every shot for Fringe for 2 years. And that was literally my film school of writing emails, presenting things to him, and having to figure out how I was going to creatively problem solve and wrestle with this creative and figure out how I was going to translate that from his vision and from the showrunner's vision to my vendors and my artists and my team on set. And that kind of really obviously accelerated my learning curve and how to creatively problem solve scientific sci-fi and realistic effects.
That's very, very interesting, because the concept of building an entire world over like texts
Email.
back and forth.
It was just emails.
I mean text
Yeah,
as in like
exactly,
it's
words.
as in words.
Yeah.
And the idea of creating something that is so inherently visual, but just through like mostly words.
I got really, really good at describing things specifically and asking specific questions and creatively presenting ideas in a concise way, because he didn't have a lot of time. He was off doing Star Trek. He was off doing Mission Impossibles. He was doing all these other things, but he just liked visual effects. And at that point, to be honest, I don't even know if he was reading scripts or getting cuts. I just know he loves visual effects, and he could look at something and go, that's right, that's wrong. I love that. Oh, wait, what's that idea? Oh, how are we doing that? And it was back in the day of, 22 episode seasons, and every single night, I figured out the sweet timing of when it was after the kids went to bed, right before he got into everything else. I'd hit him with an email, and we just had this really great relationship of communication. And it really taught me a lot about how to visualize and verbalize specifics of a creative nature. And figuring out how to do that has then developed into trying to translate when I hear an idea from a producer, when I read something, or when I hear a showrunner or a director, understanding how to speak their language and how to translate that to artists and technicians.
And what maybe would be some pitfalls that people that are not that articulate might come across? Like, like if someone is describing things wrong, that, or if someone misinterprets something, and then if you go do it, does that absorb so much of your time?
Yeah, for me, it's the job of the creative on our side is to listen. So I do a lot of listening before I act, listening to what a producer wants, listening to how they want it. That's one of the trickiest things about it, is understanding your audience. I had some hilarious ones of like, I had the privilege of working with incredible directors who happened to work in TV at random times. Jon Favreau, I did his first TV show when we did Revolution, and he was hilarious. He was just like, his famous one was, Jay, I don't care how the sausage gets made. He's like, I do not care. He's like, and I knew then to never talk to him about programs or ways something happened. It was all, tell me what it, just show it to me. Just show it to me. I had a meeting with Cameron Crowe when we were doing Roadies, a random show for Showtime. And my favorite quote from him, he said, Jay, this blue screen bus comp needs to feel like hope. And I'm like, it's a blue screen bus comp, thinking to myself. But I then knew what he wanted. He didn't care about, did we match the black levels in the balance of the comp, or did we get the edges right? It was, how did it feel? What emotion did it evoke? And then I've worked with other people that are technicians, and they're like the I can tell that the f-stop on the background's too, like whatever it is. So you have to learn how to communicate that, and then figure out which artists in the world you connect with. So that's the other thing, is there are so many talented visual effects companies, and I've had the privilege of working with a ton of them. But I've definitely found the ones that I've connected with, and I can look at their reel and see if there's a certain, I don't know if you can call it gritty, organic quality to all the stuff that I've worked on. It started with JJ and definitely with Jonah Nolan and Lisa Joy and Westworld and Fallout and all those things. We rely a lot on practical effects. I still shoot on film. I'm now 21 years in, and there's not a single year that I've worked that I haven't been on a project shooting on film. And it has a different quality to it. And I have to work with artists that can capture and retain that quality to it. And it's still a skill that, there's definitely people out there, but not everybody still has that.
And in terms of the projects maybe that were the most challenging and maybe some that were the most rewarding, do you have any like standouts there? Because it's worked across so many.
Yeah, Westworld was definitely the most daunting at the beginning. I remember reading the script for that. And, we were doing so many pilots back then. You didn't quite know what it was going to be. And I remember talking to Athena Wickham, I've had the privilege of working with her for my entire career for 20 years. And I remember she was like, "Oh, we're going out to Anthony Hopkins." And I'm like, right then I'm like, oh, that's a big show. Okay. That's a little different. And I knew then kind of the scope, and then getting to work with Jonah as the director on that one, that was to capture that world and to have it be so specific and unique. The combination of the tech and the Western and the futurism, the ideas of what that might be, all those deep things, that to me was one of the most challenging as well as the most satisfying. Back in the day, doing broadcast television was just hard. It was just 22 episodes in 9 months. There was one year that we did when I was working with JJ and Bad Robot, and we did 50 episodes of television, 2 pilots, 4,000 visual effect shots in 9 months. And it was like, I just look back on that. I'm like, how did we even push that much through the pipeline? So that was challenging just from making sure, because the bar was still really high from what they had set. So making sure all the effects still met that standard. And that's really when I learned to say no a lot more. When it was just, I never really have felt like that visual effects should be that front and center. So I have no problem just telling producers and writers going, no, we can't do that. We don't have the time. We don't have the money. You're not going to be happy with the result. I don't ever have let's take on that challenge. I'm happy to take on the challenge in a way that's going to keep everybody safe. I always feel like my job is to give everybody a safe playground to play in. So I'm like, I set up the parameters for whatever type show it is. And some shows the playground's much larger and some it's much smaller. And if it's smaller, you have to accept that and I don't mind pushing the boundaries when it's safe. But when I found when we push the boundaries when it's not is when those messy things happen and things end up on the air that you can't fix and end up hurting the show more than helping it, because we get a little too ambitious in the wrong ways.
And in terms of the industry and how, like, the tech of the industry and the viewing habits of the industry and the distribution of the industry have all changed so hugely in that period of time that you've been working on it. On your end, what has that meant? Or like, do you feel that, or where does that change what your job is?
For me, it hasn't changed much at this point. It's definitely shifting, but at the end of the day, our job is still to tell stories. And we try to always come back to that over and over and over again, and to try and distill it down to what's the best way to tell this story? What's the best tool to use to tell this story? All right, Jay, this one's yours. All right, Howard, our production designer, this one's yours. All right, the special effects team or the makeup effects team, okay, this one's yours. And having that trust that we've now been able to build up over all these years, it's been amazing. And that's been the fun part of still understanding. We still keep an old fashioned set. I mean, we shoot on film. No phones are allowed on set because, Jonah's rule is he's like, guys, we made movies for 100 years without phones. If you need your phone, I guarantee you don't need your phone to do the job that's in front of you to make this movie. If you do, you can step off the set because on the set, that's the job. And so there's a purity to that has kept everybody focused and kept the creative. I think you can feel that. You can feel the attention to the detail and the artistry of it. And it goes, for everybody, the actors, the crew, everybody. And it's been a lot of fun to keep that purity of, well, let's still tell the story. The story's king, and that's the only thing that really matters.
And in many ways, the culture has changed a lot of times. Like how things have been made has changed, and then who's making them has changed, and where they're being made now is in the process of being changed. And in terms of your job and your role, how have those things maybe impacted you?
They haven't. That's the funny part, is that, at the end of the day, I still get a script. I still got to break it down. We still got to figure out how we're going to do it. The tools that we're going to do to make those are changing, but it's still artists being artists, whether it be me or the team on set or the visual effects companies that we hire. And the tools they use are definitely changing. I mean, I remember when we couldn't do water. I remember when we couldn't do fire. I remember when we couldn't do hair. We couldn't do faces. We couldn't do babies. We couldn't do any of that stuff. And all the tools that we've been building have been creating those. And now AI is a new tool that's going to be used in new ways. I don't even know how all we use volume technology now. But they're all just tools to tell the story in the most effective way. And I'm sure the tools are going to keep changing. I'm sure in 10 years, there's going to be some new tool that we're figuring out what it is. And that's the fun of it. And not being scared, but still going into all of them with an ethical mindset of, we still value human artistry and human craftsmanship. And we're always going to, because there's even using AI as a tool. It's still, my goodness, I don't know if you've ever played with it, but you can get a lot of things out of certain things, and you can get a lot of things where you just spend a lot of time, and my goodness, drawing something would have been way quicker.
Yeah, and no one has four hands. Do you know, it is just, and I know those things will be fixed, but the uncanny valley element of it.
Certain things don't work and certain things do. And there's certain things that are incredible that it's doing now. And, I embrace the things that it can do well. But it's just like when volume technology came out, and for a while everyone thought it was the silver bullet, and everyone was going we're all going to be filming on volume stages. And I'm like, well, yes and no. And I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit the same with this. And I think there are definitely parts that are going to be extraordinary, and the scope and scale, and some things you're going to be able to tell some stories that you just wouldn't have been able to tell before. And that's great. I'm not quite sure how all those pieces are going to filter into all the pieces that we're working right now on, for me personally.
And have you felt I know things have been sort of, maybe not being wholly centered in LA in that same way that it was. I know, that in the States people have been working with international vendors a lot more, and, even in terms of funding and co-producing and things like that. Do you work with people all over the world now? Do you where do you find those vendors that you like to create with?
Yeah,
how do you build those relationships too?
It just has taken years of finding the right artists. We still film in LA, which has been great. So we did season 2 of Fallout. We did 3 seasons of Westworld in LA. And then in terms of the vendors, I have vendors that I still work with in LA. Cosa VFX that I've worked with for years. I love working with them, that team, Tom and the gang. And then they have vendors throughout the world. So sometimes we keep them based. Our heads of departments for them are in LA, and then they have artists in Vancouver, so they can collect the rebate and be more competitive. But then there's teams like ILP in Sweden, and I loved working with them so much for so many years that I just basically allocated a certain percentage of my budget. And I'm like, okay, guys, well, I'm not going to have any of this be tax rebatable because I got to have them do a certain part of this. And I'm not going to. And Jonah has always been very supportive of finding the right creative for the right team. And if they're in a tax rebate area, great. And if they're not, we figure out still how to make it work within the bucket that we're given. And that's where my job comes in, of understanding where I find value of going, no, they're going to make this so much better. It's not that it's going to cost more. It's that we're going to allocate it correctly so we don't think of it as costing more. It's just what it costs to make it what it is. And then everything else has to fit inside the same bucket. And that's, that's the fun of it and the challenge of it. Of you never have enough time, you never have enough money, and that's okay. You can still make it work. I've always found that, if you start out right from the creative side, you can always make it work.
And what are your personal favorite elements to create? Like, what are the things that you get the most satisfaction when you build?
I think it's world building. I love a good creature. Especially weird ones like we were able to do season 1 of Fallout. The Gulper is just so weird and disturbing and amazing. And I do love like the Rad Scorpion we did this year and all the stuff we did with the Deathclaw. There's something about just world building in general, of being able to work with Howard, our production designer, and figure out how we're going to build that world together. I think like building the beginning of Fallout for season 1, when she comes out of the vault and she sees the Santa Monica Pier, and I always like basing things on real things. So having grown up in LA, recreating that, on the coast of Namibia was really satisfying, of giving that first moment and kind of figuring out. I think that's part of it, is when you figure out, we call it almost like finding your North Star for what the show is, and you create a shot. And for the rest of the season, you're kind of looking back at that shot going, does it feel like that? It should feel like that. It doesn't quite feel like that. All right, let's go find it again. And I did that. I remember we did that for random shows. Each show, now that I think of it, there was always a moment where, whether it be, a certain sequence in Westworld, or for Revolution, it was this building I had a matte painter do, and it was just the Sears Tower. John Hancock Tower covered in ivy. And it was like, there's the show. There it is. We nailed it. All right. Make everything feel like that. Mm-hmm. And there's something visceral about it when you can feel whether you nailed it or not.
So that's the artistry. That's your gut, your creative.
Yeah, you look at it and you go, that's it.
That's
that feels right.
The tone of it.
Yeah.
Have there ever been moments in your career where it's hard to find that? Because again, like, it's something that is organic, or is it like...
No, there definitely have been hard ones where you're just kind of... sometimes the sci-fi ones are the hardest ones. I remember there was a show, it was only on for 12 episodes. It was called Almost Human. It was a great show. Carl Urban, and it was super fun. But that one was tricky. I remember that was a fun one because there was a shot at the end of the pilot, and it was this shot that rose up over the wall, and it was basically establishing the entire look of the world. And we had a version of it, and it just didn't work. And I remember it was like we were cranking on the pilot, and JJ just sent me back. He's like, this doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, well, what doesn't work? And I listed off all of these things. He never answered me. I'm like, is it the height of the camera? Is it the lens? Is it the color? Never answered me back. I'm like, oh, goodness. He's okay. I got to figure this one out. And I used it as an audition piece. And I went to 9 different artists. And I gave them the same exact brief. I gave them the shot. I gave them the plate and the shot that didn't work. And I'm like, all right, let's figure it out. And the variety of difference that I got back for those 9 shots was jaw-dropping. I could not believe how different every artist's version of that was.
And did people get it? Did people make it work?
One did.
Yeah.
The other ones, they didn't even come close to working. I was shocked at how hard it was to crack that nut of that particular shot. And it was the smallest company, no one had ever heard of them, and they did all of the world building for that entire show.
Wow.
But they were able to capture what that was. And like, yes, we then have to go back a few times, but I remember seeing it the first time and I'm like, oh, that artist got it. And sometimes it's that's the beauty of it, is trying to find who that is in the world to capture that moment for that particular show and that particular shot.
And is it harder or easier to go to projects that either have an existing fandom or existing, like, that have kind of a decent amount of existing IP that you can draw from? Or is it a bit intimidating because you have a fan base that
It's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Like, Fallout has been so much fun because for me, Fallout was the best of both worlds, which was, okay, we have this incredible, rich franchise with all of these visuals. So we get to take those things. And the hardest thing about Fallout, we get a lot of credit visually for making it feel like Fallout, but for me, it all comes down to what Geneva and Graham and Jonah have come up with the tone, because that's where the show's at, is the tone, the actors, the casting choices. You know, Howard and I make it look like it should look, but the feeling of it that all the gamers have that they love about it, it's really, you know, we create the space for them to feel that, but the delivery of that emotional connection is all on the actors and the writing and directing. And it's been so spectacular to see how they've pulled all this together and really honored the fans, honored the fan base, honored the game. And we've been able to create something that, you know, that quote unquote feels like Fallout, which from every single gamer I've talked to, they're like, I can't believe it feels like Fallout. I'm like, yeah, I know they did. Somehow they were able to thread that needle, which was very daunting, but really satisfying.
When you got it in. Yeah. As someone who's a creative, how important is the depth of the writing in the scripts that you get? Like, how, like, do you unconsciously put more effort in when you really like the script? Like, are you going to be like, oh, this is really good? And like, I don't think you've worked on anything bad from what I can see. Haven't. But it's more like, you know, like some things are like shit on.
Yeah, I mean, when we got, like I said, when I got Westworld, I'm like, oh, yeah, this is a career-changing show. You know, it just is.
And it's one of those moments in TV. Like, it's one of the ones, like, everybody
Well,
watched.
And I randomly had this thought. I'm like, I'm pretty sure, and I'm fine if I'm wrong, but I haven't been able to think of how this one wouldn't be true, that it was the most anticipated television show ever. When you think about it, Game of Thrones wasn't a big hit when it started.
No, people were brought to it.
Exactly. Lost was, but it was broadcast, so it was only anticipated for, like, you know, 3 months when a commercial came out, and then it was J.J. Abrams, but no stars were in it. But we had J.J. having just done Star Trek and doing the biggest movies ever, and he had done all these television shows. He was an executive producer. We had Jonah just coming off all the stuff with Dark Knight and Interstellar and all of that stuff. We had the IP of Westworld, which was, while it wasn't as well known, it was still beloved. And then we had the craziest cast you've ever seen. I mean, you have Evan Rachel Wood, you have Ed Harris, you have Anthony Hopkins, you have Jeffrey Wright, you have Tandaway, you have, you know, James Marsden. Like, down the line, you're like, how in the world? This cast is insane. And I just remember the anticipation for that, and having that, this season one specifically in that pilot, be so hitting so hard and so well. That was truly satisfying.
Yeah, because it was nothing like anyone had ever seen before as well. And I think even the themes still carry, unfortunately, like through to the darkness of today, like that. That it was so. Yeah, it was one of those ones. And it was one of the ones, if you weren't familiar with the subject matter, you were just enthralled. And, you know, like, in writing, they're like, oh, you have to say this, you have to explicitly say that. But it was like, no, you were dropped in this.
Yeah.
And you have to like, it's like, you know, in The Wire, you're like, you have to
Yeah,
figure
exactly.
your own way through this as a viewer. There's no patronizing. to
No.
you. And are there any worlds or spaces or things that you would love to get the opportunity to create that you haven't, you know?
Yeah, I'd love to do I still haven't gotten to do a space show. Someday I'd love to do a space show. And I haven't done like a true, you know, fantasy sort of. Everything's kind of been more, you know, Western and sci-fi and post-apocalyptic. I've done a lot of post-apocalyptic, a lot of ruined buildings. So I think it'd be fun to do something that's not just ruined buildings.
I think we all need like a new Star Trek.
Yeah.
I kept waiting for the Orwell to come back, and I was like,
they're all still out there, but I think it'd be fun to do but we'll see someday.
yeah. Okay, that's next on your slate, and we look forward
We'll
to
see.
watching that one. But thank you so much for
Thanks for
chatting with
having
us.
me.
It's great to have you on.
Appreciate it.
And thank you to the Spinners Mill Studio, to RENDR Festival, and to our podcast sponsors, the National Talent Academy for VFX. And to learn more about the work they do, check out nationaltalentacademies.ie/VFX. In part 2 of the series, we'll be chatting with Irish television and feature film photographer Helen Sloan, who was behind the production stills of How to Train Your Dragon, Wednesday seasons 1 and 2, and Game of Thrones. So make sure you subscribe to Film Ireland wherever you get your podcasts.